A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the 62nd edition of the Together for Education webinars brought to you by Notebook. Over the last few months, it has been our privilege to play host to some fantastic educators and thought leaders who have shared their thoughts and views on various aspects of our school education system. Months ago, when this lockdown had just started, when we were just coming to terms with the reality of the pandemic, we set up this platform so that educators could get a more hands-on experience of platforms that they were going to use in the months to come. Little did we know that this event would take a life of its own, and today we are humbled by the kind of love and support that we have received from all of you. For that, I thank you. We at Notebook are an EdTech company, a brand that was started with the vision of making education available, easy, and enjoyable to every student out there. We create these short, crisp videos mapped to the school curriculum that teachers can use in their classes, whether it's online or offline, and they can use these videos to introduce topics to the students. This makes the introduction more visually appealing, perhaps a little more attention grabbing. The student, months later when they need to revise before an exam, have access to the same videos on personal devices, be it a mobile phone or a laptop or a tablet, whatever they have access to. And they can then play these videos again, which would help them revise for their exams and also remember what the teacher had taught in class on that particular day. What I will do now is, before we start the session today, play you a short sample of one of the Notebook videos before we go on to the speaking sessions.
Did you know that when we open our mouth, it is always the lower jaw that moves? Try to keep your lower jaw still and move just the upper jaw. Your head will move back as the joint is fixed. So many bones in our body. Some we can touch and feel. But can you touch all 206? To get a better understanding of our bone structure, we use the X-ray machine. That gives us a picture of the bones inside the body. Have you ever seen an X-ray plate? A doctor takes a look at these plates to understand if a bone is broken or displaced. In an X-ray, we can see the many small bones in our wrists that make them so flexible. These are called carpals. The skeleton also helps in keeping the vital organs safe. The heart and lungs are kept secure inside the rib cage, bones of the chest and the backbone. You can feel both with your fingers. Hold your breath for a few seconds and touch the part of your chest. Can you feel the weirdly bent bone? That's a rib. There are 12 ribs on each side of the chest. These ribs are attached at the back of the backbone. The backbone is made up of 33 small bones called the vertebrae. They help us arch our back. Do you feel something hard and pokey on either side of your back? Those are the shoulder bones. Similarly, the heart bone on which you sit is called the pelvic bone. The part of the skeleton that we usually show to scare people, the skull, is made of many joined bones that protect the brain. Other than bones, we have cartilages and muscles that also help in movement. Cartilages are not as hard as bones, but not as soft as flesh. Touch the top of your ear or the tip of your nose. Can you feel a flexible part that you can easily bend? Those are the cartilages.
That, ladies and gentlemen, was a sample, a small segment of one of the Notebook videos. On the Notebook website and apps, you would find more than 10,000 such videos catering to class 1 to class 12 of the CBSE curriculum. With that, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time to move on to the first speaker today. Our first speaker today is Mr. Philip Barrett. Mr. Barrett retired as the Deputy Headmaster from the illustrious Doon School in Dehradun after 44 years of serving in education across various institutions. Mr. Barrett served the Doon School as Housemaster, Head of Department, Dean of Student Welfare, Dean of Activities, Deputy Headmaster, Second Master, and Acting Headmaster with great distinction. He also carried out a visioning exercise for the Doon School in the year 2011 through an in-depth study of a number of British public schools and various schools in the US. Mr. Barrett qualified as a leadership trainer at Wellington College, UK in the year 2000. He's also an athlete, an adventurer, and a naturalist. Sir, privileged to have you with us. Over to you.
Shubayu, can you see me? Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. I can see you. I can hear you loudly.
Because I've had a bit of a hiccup with my laptop, and so I'm using my phone right now. So I lost my notes as well, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, thank you so much, and very good evening to you, Achin, Abhishek, our entire Notebook team, as well as our esteemed panelists, Mrs. Rao and Mrs. Maria, and all the guests who have tuned in. So let me just say that exchanges, I mean, when I look at student exchanges, I think that I can look at three types of exchanges. One, of course, is a student exchange, where
Sir, I think your connection is going in and out. So right now your video is stuck and I don't think we're getting audio. Mr. Bharat, sir, can you hear me? I think Mr. Bharat is facing some connectivity issues. Let's just wait for a few seconds and see if sir joins us back.
Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir, we can hear and we can see you now. We just lost you for a second.
I'm so sorry. Yeah. So I'm so sorry. So just to carry on, where, like in St. Xavier's, Bombay, they allowed students from Sophia College to do a year, the last year at St. Xavier's. So like this, there are a lot of Indian colleges that have tie-ups with colleges abroad, and our students can exchange with other students. Their foreign students come to us. And the third type of exchange is probably the teacher exchanges, where schools exchange teachers. Now, I was lucky that in the Doon School where I last worked, we had a very, very well-organized and well-worked-out exchange program with a number of schools that were in the Round Square group. So how student exchanges work is that the headmasters or principals are part of a larger headmasters conference, or the Boys School Coalition, or the Round Square movement, or the SAIPSA, which is the South Asian International Schools Conference. So all schools belong to some sort of big, larger family. And they tie up that, with each year, we'll have about 20 to 30 exchanges. Now, we can't send all students on exchanges. And so there has to be a procedure which is fair and firm by which we select students for exchange. Now, the way we did it in school was we selected our best ambassadors to represent us with schools abroad. And for this, we had them fill up a questionnaire. They had to do an essay. And then they had to sit through a number of interviews with the headmaster and the senior teachers to make sure that we sent our best students abroad. And we really, we had a tea for these students before they left, instilling in them what they should do and what they shouldn't do, what we expect of them. We also had a tea for the students who went on exchange on their return. So we did a debrief to find out what they had learned. Have they picked up something, some bad habits? And we also had many of these students write in the Doon School Weekly and even address the school at Monday assemblies to explain to the rest of the school that what they did there, how they spent their time, how they grew. I personally feel, if you look at exchanges, that I think it's a good practice. Of course, it needs to be, it's just another opportunity that schools offer their students when they offer this huge buffet of activities, from games and, all the extracurriculars. It is just another offering that we make our students. Not all schools can do exchanges, and I'm sure that residential schools find doing exchanges far easier than day schools. However, day schools can do exchanges, and we too have exchanged with day schools, where their students live in our hostels and our residence, and our students live with their families. In Australia and South Africa, where we exchange, New Zealand, Canada, parts of Europe, Kenya, Peru, we exchange with Peru, Germany. So we have these exchange programs where our students actually live with families, and they it's a cross-cultural experience. Not only are they involved with studies in the classroom, but we encourage them to do something different: play rugby, learn Latin, learn Greek, do a game or do an activity that you are not familiar with in India. Many of these students who go on exchange, I have to say, carry the best of our school abroad. Many of them have started journals, weeklies, started a new dance form. And when they come back and when we debrief them, they also bring some of the best practices that they have picked up there back home. And that is the real use of an exchange, where there is this cross-pollination of ideas, of culture. Many of these students, they have to, there's a week of the exchange students, where they have to perform either dance or music or culture or cook an Indian meal. And they're Chinese exchange students, Russian exchange students. And this whole week is great fun and frolic for these exchange students. I know that we exchanged with Eton and a school called Millfield. Now, Millfield is one of the most sporting schools in England. Their swimmers go to the Olympics. Now, when we exchange with them, there's no point sending an academic. We send our sporty people. And when we exchange with Eton, they always want a cricketer. So there's no point sending a footballer to Eton because he just will be sitting on the sidelines. The other thing is that when we did send our best ambassadors, a lot of students made a noise and said, oh, these people in any case can go abroad. They belong to rich families. And if you send our best students abroad, the same students become prefects and win laurels. How about sending anyone abroad? How about sending the students that need the exposure to a foreign country or to another school? So for a couple of years, the school tried a random method. We just called for people who wanted to go on exchange. And then we sifted through some of the troublemakers or people who had a bad record, removed them, and we put the rest of the names in a hat. And we pulled from the hat. So we made it a very fair system. Some of the students were anti this, obviously, because we got reports from the exchange schools which said, no point sending this kid because he didn't do very much. He sat in his room and twiddled his thumbs. So we went back to sending our best students, because some of these students that went on the random system didn't flourish and didn't give our school a good name. On the downside of exchanges, it is costly because students have to pay for the airfare abroad. But once you're there, the host school takes care of all your needs, your laundry, your telephone bills, everything is taken care of. But a real exchange is not where you go abroad, but where your exchange partner from your exchanging school comes to us. And that is the real exchange, in my view, where a foreigner comes to Doon and Doon boy goes abroad. As far as teacher exchanges are concerned, not all teachers find it beneficial, because if you're a Hindi language teacher or a physical training instructor, you don't get a chance to go abroad. Mathematics, physics, science, probably more it's easier for them to go abroad and do an exchange. But I think that on the whole, it worked in Doon School. Some students tend to get lost, and they come back totally changed. They come back negative. They come back with strange ideas. And it takes us some time to bring these students back into the fold, as it were, because they picked up all the wrong things. We somehow made our mistakes. We sent the wrong kids abroad, got into trouble. And but by and large, if your selection process is well thought of, we send the best students abroad, and we do well on exchanges. I don't think that exchanges have much on the negative side. On the positive side, I think most of our exchange students gained a lot, learned a lot, and brought back fresh ideas. Having said that, a word about teacher exchanges. Very beneficial. I haven't had the exchange. We never had. I didn't benefit from the exchange, but I did go abroad and learn from other schools, as my CV says. For example, we at the Doon always felt that we were really doing a great job on adventure. And, we sent our kids into the hills twice a year. And when I went to school in California, which was really extreme in the outdoors, I learned that they have a 3-week outdoor adventure trip, which every student has to do. And I came back absolutely amazed. And I came back and I said, look, what we do is nothing compared to it. It's nothing compared to what these people do. So let's not gloat on our achievements. We need to grow with the times. We have to learn from the others who are better than us. And that's how I think exchanges benefit us. So having said that, I think I'll pass it back to you, Shubhayu. That's what I have on exchanges.
Wonderful, sir. Thank you so much. Sorry for the tech issues, but I do believe that your thoughts were heard very well across. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shubhayu. Thank you.
Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time to move on to our second speaker for the day. Our second speaker today is Achin Bhattacharya. Achin is the founder and CEO at Notebook. A chartered accountant by training, Achin was a director at Deloitte prior to starting Notebook. He has worked in India and abroad in various senior capacities in GE, PwC, KPMG, and Deloitte. He is a fellow of the ICAI and a member of CPA Australia. He is also the recipient of the prestigious Indian Achievers Award. Achin is an avid reader and a passionate traveler with keen interests in economics, history, literature, and philosophy. He is a regular speaker at various forums and chambers of commerce and also contributes articles to numerous publications regularly. He is also on the board of some of the most renowned corporates and contributes significantly to their brand strategies. Achin, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Shubhayu, am I audible?
Yeah, Achin, loud and clear.
I once again welcome all of you to today's session on a topic which fascinates students, teachers, and parents globally. Student exchange programs are one of the most exciting phases of student life, and its benefits are not restricted to academics alone. As we're all aware, it also promotes cross-cultural exchange, sharing of best practices, and most importantly, friendships across the world. In the current scenario, when travel is still on the preferably avoid list for most of us, what is the situation around the globe with regard to student exchange programs? For example, last fall, Elon University in North Carolina had 550 students studying abroad. This year, they have 13. They are expecting that numbers to increase substantially as study abroad advisors are seeking an uptick of virtual appointment requests. I was reading about an interview of the university's executive director of global engagements. And according to her, they have actually opened their cycle applications for 2021, fall of 2021, and have loads and loads of application already. So now, if we analyze the trend, last year 550 applications, gone down to 13 this year. But next year the picture looks rosy. That means people are willing to travel. Now, this was bound to happen. If you look at things from their perspective, as people are not allowed to cross many international borders, Americans are not allowed to cross many international borders, including those of, say, European Union. But there are exceptions for people traveling for work, emergencies, and school. Although the beginning of the COVID outbreak was chaotic, if you look at things from US perspective, it's chaotic for students abroad and for all students abroad who are studying globally. We saw our own students coming back from various parts of the world. We saw what kind of initiatives had to be taken to ensure that they safely travel back home. So it was quite chaotic for students studying abroad. As exchange programs were cancelled and borders were closed, students are taking the opportunity to study abroad again. And now that they have been given the green light, especially for avenues like work and study, visas are being given. For a lot of family also, I guess this one is very important. If you look at things from an individual family's perspective, from the perspective of parents, I'm sure it was a risk calculation. You know, we all understand that you do have to get on an airplane, and that's definitely part of the calculus, as part of the thinking. But once you get off the airplane, some of these locations are probably looking actually pretty favorable. And especially if you compare that to what we were discussing, the situation in the US, compared to the relative conditions and positivity rates, some of these countries were definitely more favorable. Now, before the pandemic, hundreds and thousands of US students were studying abroad each year. I was just looking at some numbers, you know, and the reason is these data were fairly available, like as far as US numbers are concerned. In 17-18 school year, you know, 2 years back, more than roughly around 3.5 lakh students were studying abroad for academic credit. Now, US students studying abroad in places like UK, Italy, Spain, France, Germany. Now, these are the most popular destinations. Now, from that situation, definitely the recent pandemic has posed a huge challenge in terms of students coming back, in terms of students and their parents hesitating to send their child back, liability issues, logistical concerns. At times, they outweigh the positive elements of studying abroad. So this is one one statistic that I wanted to share. Now, this particular topic, as far as this topic is concerned, student exchange program, we can look at the topic from various perspectives. As Bharat sir very aptly discussed and described the topic from an individual school's perspective. And I'm sure members of our esteemed panel today will deliberate on this further. So I decided to take a more holistic view of the topic and deliberate on the different aspects. Because if you look at student exchange program from a global perspective, also students are going abroad for study. You know, what has been the entire impact in terms of cultural exchange, in terms of, and especially during pandemic times? How has the whole situation evolved? Another very interesting case study that I went through, University of Montana. The University of Montana incidentally ranks 17th in the US and 5th among public universities producing Rhodes Scholars. Now I was going through some numbers of this university, and I was going through an interview of one of the professors. Now, if I recollect, Professor Stephen Yoshimura says, and he highlighted a very important aspect. He said that there is no way that he could promise students a fruitful educational experience if he took them overseas at this time during pandemic times. However, now this is interesting. He doesn't guarantee any fruitful experience. However, when students ask him for advice, naturally students do turn to their teachers for advice with respect to studying abroad or request letters of recommendation for overseas programs, he doesn't discourage them. So on one hand, he doesn't guarantee a fruitful experience considering the logistical challenges, considering the crisis everywhere. But if someone comes to him for recommendation, he doesn't discourage them. He thinks everybody should be able to make their own decisions. And that the pandemic situation alone is a reason to not travel. So he feels that the pandemic situation alone should not be a reason to not travel. But it is a reason to be exceptionally cautious and mindful, to be careful of the probable complications. So another situation that has evolved out of this current pandemic, and if you look at this, if you look at study abroad programs, and if you look at the pandemic, and if you look at the correlation and as to how the entire ecosystem is developing around this. I was going through a webinar the other day. This was hosted by EF Tours, a company that runs study abroad programs. Now the audience in this particular webinar, and the audience was primarily educators from around the world. And the company said that travel insurance can be a way to account for coronavirus worries. So travel insurance is being pitched more strongly that students may feel more comfortable having travel insurance, which anyways in most international travel is mandatory and students do cover. But the coverage, in terms of getting sick abroad, having travel plans cancelled, needing to be flown home for care. So insurance companies are also trying to tailor-make their packages, keeping the coronavirus pandemic in mind for students who are traveling abroad to study. Now, if you look at things, how unfortunate the situation has been for students who are actually studying abroad during last few months. And I was going through some incidents, and some of them really very touching incidents, I'll say. How this catastrophic pandemic is trying to shatter dreams. I was reading about a gentleman who is studying in a US college, came from Germany, Alexander Oster. He came because he is an aspiring sports person, and someday he hopes to compete in the Olympics. He is a swimmer. He studied in George Washington University, and subsequently he post completing his college, he stayed for law school. Now the challenge is, once this entire pandemic started, international students in US, and this is irrespective of discipline, this is irrespective of university, international students in US were not allowed to stay in the country if they were only taking online classes. The government said that despite the fact that COVID pandemic has forced many colleges to stop teaching in person, naturally, but the government was very clear that if students are completely studying online, if the programs are fully online, they have to leave the country or they have to transfer to a program that includes in-person classes to maintain legal status. Now, it's a huge challenge, right? Huge challenge for so many students. This was not a completely new rule. The government typically, this rule was earlier also it was there for international students. They need to take most of their classes in person. But the expectation was that, keeping pandemic in mind, this will probably be relaxed since physical in-person classes are not being held. But this was not relaxed. No flexibility was granted. And premium institutions like Harvard University, MIT have actually gone to court against Department of Homeland Security, seeking to block the rule. In fact, states like California also have moved legally. So we understand that studying abroad, at times it brings in so much of complications, right? Now, if you look at student exchange programs, and if you look at the the benefits are huge, benefits are monumental, right? And benefits have been in place for a very long time. Since the time of the other day I was going through some readings by some very famous work by German philosopher Immanuel Kant. As many of you are aware, a great central Enlightenment thinker and one of the most influential figures in modern Western philosophy. And since his time, to liberal scholars of international relations, they have always hypothesized and promoted greater cross-border contact as a powerful force. The idea is that such a contact encourages a sense of shared international community. And that's true, right? It breaks down artificial barriers, which normally separates people into different nations. Now, this hypothesis, which is, I must acknowledge, is intuitively appealing, has inspired several famous student exchange programs, which among other potential positive effects are expected to quell nationalist fervors and ward off international conflicts. And that has actually happened since ages. Now, the hypothesis has rarely been tested in a rigorous way. So the question is, does cross-border contact really foster a feeling of community? When I say community, of course, international community. Perceptions of foreign threat, levels of nationalism and patriotism. So what is the effect on a student who goes abroad for studying and when he comes back? Does he turn lesser patriotic or more? As well as demographics and study abroad program characteristics. Now, there is some very interesting research on this. And I found this very interesting. So just to share the key findings of that. Now, first, if we test this hypothesis that cross-border contact promotes a sense of shared international community, what political scientist Carl Deuce also said, that we feeling across cultural divides. Now, surprisingly, the hypothesis was not supported. None of the indicators of international community was higher on average for students returning from study abroad, for those yet to travel. In fact, those who had just returned from a semester abroad felt they had significantly fewer values in common and were more likely to say their understanding of key concepts were different from people of their host countries. So this shows, this is very insightful, right? Because this clearly shows that people who are going abroad and coming back, students, when they come back, at times they really appreciate their home country even more. At times they are
Austin, we can't hear you. Is it a network issue at my end or at your end? Looks like today is a day where we are facing quite a few network issues. My sincere apologies, ladies and gentlemen. We will try to get Austin back online as quickly as we can. Abhishek, could you please confirm if Austin is joining back right away? While you're waiting for Atin to join back, there's been one question in the Q&A box. Somebody has asked, what should be the criteria and selection of students whom you want to send for exchange? I'm sure this and many other questions would be answered in the panel discussion to follow. In case you have a question that you would want one of our panelists to answer, do use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to type in that question, and time permitting, we will see to it that your questions are answered. Abhishek, can you please confirm if Achin is joining back? Once again, my sincere apologies, ladies and gentlemen. It's just technical snag that Achin is facing at the moment. We promise to have him back online in the next 1 minute.
Shubha, am I audible?
Yeah, Achin, we can hear you. Welcome back.
Yeah, I guess there was some little technical glitch. Really sorry for that. So, where we are, so I was discussing that students returning from their study abroad were found to be considerably prouder of their own country, along with the range of dimensions, including its literature, achievement in arts, armed forces, athletic accomplishments, and political influence. So, it shows that the results are surprisingly positive. So there's a research in US which shows that students were prouder to be American once they came back and more patriotic. And they believe a heightened, and they displayed a heightened belief in nation superiority. And I'm sure that's the same case with countries around the world. So I've personally interacted with many students coming back after a stint overseas in various universities. And I've seen a great amount of patriotic nationalism in them. So, as far as cross-cultural exchanges are concerned, there's no doubt about it that the results are surprisingly positive. Now, the question is that how does a nation look at it when it comes to overseas education? We have been discussing things from an individual perspective. Of course, from an individual student's perspective, the benefits are innumerable. Much more overall broader exposure, cross-cultural exchange, making great relationships around the world. But how does a host nation look at it? When a student goes abroad as a part of an exchange program for a year, or goes abroad in a foreign university, so how does the host nation look at it, and what are the benefits from the host nation's perspective? So there's no doubt about it that it's mutually beneficial. The host nation benefits equally, if not more, from the student. It's not only that the student benefits. So if you look at popular destinations around the world where students travel, there's no doubt about it that US is the first destination that comes to our mind. Earlier, definitely for Indians traveling abroad, United Kingdom was a place to be. But if you look at recent numbers are in favor of US. Now, if you look at things from the host nation's perspective, for instance, US, before 1920s, early foreign students who came as exchange students on commission from their home countries' governments, they toured US and its higher education institutions. These countries, as well as the host nation, hoped that young people would bring ideas about modernization and progress. And when they go back home after their studies, definitely they would go back as cultural ambassadors. So at that point of time, migration was relatively unrestricted. By the early 20th century, industrialization fueled a robust system of higher education and attracted even more foreign students. However, the increasing number of foreign students was met with rising xenophobia about over a number of immigrants entering the country in these years. So naturally, laws came in, laws that restricted immigration. For instance, Chinese Exclusion Act, Emergency Quota Act, 1921. The category of foreign students was singled out as a kind of exception to restrictive policies. Now, even it went as far as students being detained along with other immigrants at an island, Ellis Island. So there was a non-profit organization which lobbied very hard and pushed for creation of a non-immigrant visa category. So that is how student visa came in. A separate non-immigrant visa for students who would otherwise not be admitted as immigrants. So the signal was very clear. Students can come in and study, but not as permanent settlers. So if you look at things, right from the time of initial wave of students coming in to Industrial Revolution, and then came World War II. The geopolitical changes and subsequent repositioning of US in the global arena, it shifted the thought process about foreign students. At times, I was reading a very interesting article, at times American troops found themselves unable to communicate with its allies or other nations. Foreign students were seen as people bringing linguistic skills for the purpose of national security. So they contributed, right? And after World War II came in Cold War. Even as the heightened concerns about national security and subversion emerged during first decades of Cold War, US continued to admit foreign students. But the thought process shifted. It eagerly sought students whose economic potential and specific skills were needed by the government. Also, what happened is during Cold War, if you see, admitting students from abroad became a diplomatic signal of US generosity and welcoming attitude. It strengthened the ties between US and its allies, non-aligned countries around the world. Foreign students were recruited for their potential contribution to US. And they went back as poster children for exporting democracy to the rest of the world. Now, it really shows the entire movement, right? Starting from early students coming in to Industrial Revolution, to the effects of World War II, to the effects of Cold War. And then the Cold War ended. The value of US education went up. It became the sole superpower. And the entire rhetoric shifted to admitting foreign students who would be future chief executive officers, thought leaders, and the entire focus was on knowledge economy. And in knowledge economy, as you're all aware, talent becomes a key kind of capital. So we need to invest in talent. The understanding was very clear. And then came in World Trade Center bombings, 1993. The entire picture again changed. So why we are discussing this is we are trying to discuss its impact on international students going in, impact in terms of mindset of the host country. So then came World Trade Center bombings, 1993. And again, the entire perspective changed. Increasing security, a new system came in, student exchange visitor information system, it came in post that. But still, foreign students were admitted, and there's no doubt about it that, okay, there are some challenges and threats, but still they are contributors. And knowledge economy, information economy needed highly skilled workers, which with advanced degrees, which definitely foreign students, especially Indians, contributed in large numbers contributing to the economy. So that clearly shows that the benefit has been two-way. The benefit has been mutual. Definitely students who travel abroad for study, definitely they gain from the exposure, but the host country gains as much from the talent pool, as much from the kind of fresh perspective that comes in with each new student, a unique way of thinking. And in fact, if you look at how we were discussing about US, if you look at how majority of Americans look at a college degree, you understand the importance of foreign students even more. So there's a recent survey that I was going through. The recent survey clearly says that 37% of respondents, 37% of Americans feel that net financial benefit of their college education is negative. So you understand the mindset, right? It has its own challenges. Now, recently, like few years back, I read President Obama saying, and it is a very interesting thing that he highlighted. He said higher education is not a luxury anymore. Earning post-secondary degrees or credential is a prerequisite for 21st century jobs, and one that everyone should be able to afford. Even after that, if we read that 1 out of every 3 Americans who are surveyed feels college education is not worth the kind of dollars they need to spend on it, that clearly shows the increasing importance of foreign students who go in. So these are some aspects that I wanted to highlight with regard to the more holistic aspect of student exchange programs. I look forward to the deliberations of our esteemed panel today on this very interesting topic, and especially with regard to student exchange program from school's perspective, the opportunities, challenges, etc. I look forward to that. Thank you, Shubham. Thank you.
Thank you, Achin. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. With that, I think we have set the stage perfectly for the discussion that we have today. We have 2 very eminent educators with us. It is now my privilege to introduce them one by one. Ms. Melissa Maria has over 25 years experience in the field of education and administration in reputed schools in Mumbai, Oman, and Singapore. Presently, she is heading the Global Indian International School Smart Campus in Singapore. Having attained a master's degree in history, bachelor's degree in education, a certificate in education leadership, as well as a certificate for counseling, Ms. Melissa Maria has been responsible for the qualitative learning of the students, professional growth of teachers and staff, and positive engagement with the parents and school alumni. She has focused on working towards academic excellence, quality in education, green and sustainability initiatives, emphasizing on students' values of kindness, empathy, and service in the community. Ma'am, privileged to have you with us today, and a huge thank you for making time for this. We know it's already quite late for you over there in Singapore. So really, thank you so much for being part of this today.
My pleasure.
We also have with us Mrs. Ranjita Ra. She's had several achievements across many fields. Her tremendous efforts have resulted in the shaping of various amazing schools. She is the director of EuroKids Hafiz-Pet Hyderabad and has been the director of operations of the Global Edge Schools since 2009. The Global Edge School is a CBSE school with 4 branches, all located in Hyderabad. She was the principal of Euro School from 2009 to 2011 and the director of operations of EuroKids Hyderabad for 3 branches and the EuroKids Teachers Training Institute from 2005 to 2009. She worked as a teacher and coordinator of the primary wing at Oak Ridge International School, Andhra Pradesh's first IB certified school, from 2001 to 2005. She has worked for the Apex Education Services and has also worked as the Hyderabad representative for the University of Hawaii in the US. She was a teacher in Nasser School, which is Hyderabad's leading ICSE school, for 11 years. And she's also worked as a teacher for Oxford Grammar School, which is another Hyderabad renowned SSC schools. Some of her other achievements in extracurricular activities: she won the Jury Excellence Award for EuroKids in 2014 and 2018. Her branch of EuroKids, Hafizpet, has won the School Excellence Awards from Brainfeed in 2015 to 2019, 4 years in a row, and has been listed as one of the top 100 preschools in India, and also for the Global Edge School for the year 2017, 2018, and 2019. She got recognized and acknowledged by EuroKids in their coffee table book, The Incredibles, in 2016, out of 1,000 franchisees. She was conferred with Acharya Devabhava Award by Brainfeed in 2014. In 2011, she won the Best Principal Award from Science Olympiad Foundation, and she's undergone specialization in courses for children with learning difficulties. She was appointed as the only women's representative and coordinator for Diamond Jubilee celebrations of Osmania University by the then Vice Chancellor, Mr. Rami Reddy. For 3 consecutive years, she has topped South India for pianoforte exams with honours from Trinity School of Music, London. She's also passed the Trinity School of Music, London exams for speech and drama with honours. She has essayed roles in various plays in college and also on All India Radio. She has learnt and given performances of Bharatanatyam and Kuchipudi dance. Among her varied interests lie running for a cause, the latest being a run for the girl child. She has also enjoyed treks all along her summers. She has scaled an altitude of 12,000 feet at the Bakaria top and many other summits in the Himalayas. She was instrumental in shaping up the Sahayathon program under the Aegis of Helping Hearts, a non-profit organization started with the aim of helping the rural people below the poverty line. Ma'am, privileged to have you with us today. Absolutely thrilled that both of you could be part of this discussion.
Thank you.
I will stop my share and switch on my camera. It's an absolute privilege to meet both of you. Before I start playing the devil's advocate, because what I see every week is we have an absolutely stellar panel in front of us. And therefore, I will be the ignorant one. And my momentous ignorance shall be in balance to your brilliance. And I will leave it to you to educate me about student exchange programs. Ms. Maria, if we may come to you first for your opening statements, ma'am, before I start asking the questions.
Sure. Thank you, firstly, to Notebook for having me on this platform and panel. Just give me a second. Firstly, let me thank Abhishek Dutt for doing a great job of keeping educators across the country abreast of latest trends in online education, and especially for creating this Together for Education platform for like-minded people to come together. You know, it was a pleasure to listen to Mr. Burrett, followed by Mr. Achin, and I'm privileged to have share this platform with Ms. Ranjita, who's a lady of great renown and, you know, fascinating achievements to her credit. And of course, you, Subayu, who are going to be the moderator. When I was invited to this forum on this topic, campus to campus student exchange, the first thing that crossed my mind is, how did this concept of student exchange really come about? You know, we hear of student exchanges and the many opportunities students have these days. Well, it wasn't as popular, or perhaps, you know, I did not have that exposure as I was going through my high school, undergrad, and postgraduate studies. I must admit, however, when I began working as a teacher, I was given this opportunity for an exchange program to Andover Breadloaf summer writing program in the US at the Phillips Academy, where I truly understood the essence and benefit of these exchange programs, and how it really widens the horizons of a student who is so oblivious of the world outside of his or her existing college or school. And as I tried to read through the literature to understand the origins of this concept, in fact, Mr. Achin did touch on it a bit, it actually was largely catalyzed by world wars. In 1919, out of the ashes of the First World War, the student exchange was formed with the aim of promoting understanding among nations and preventing this kind of catastrophe that actually gave birth to the program. Then in 1951, we had the Council of International Education Exchange, and it quickly began sending Americans. So I won't repeat what Mr. Achin has said. Out of the devastation of the Second World War came one renewed effort to increase this understanding of cross-cultural learning through international exchange, and the number of international programs just increased. And it continued second half of the 20th century till it reached a turning point in the 80s. That was the Cold War at that time, coincided greatly with improved communication, technology, transportation, which led to a boom, many students passing. Beyond language skills, programs came to emphasize cultural immersion, global immersion, and development of professional skills. Now, coming to think of it, over the years, the scale of student exchange have increased multifold. And it seems like a great value add to make the student's profile look better, increase positively his chances at good opportunities for higher education, better prospects. But the one question that still keeps me thinking is, should schools not continue to emphasize the need for student exchange to mitigate any of the ill effects that countries and its citizens have due to the past struggles and belief of self-supremacy or superiority, so as to ensure that all our students are reminded of the need of a peaceful and tolerant world, for more cultural understanding and respect, of the need for a collaborative society, and for these programs so that there is an increase in the empathy quotient in our students. There's decades of psychological research that shows that young minds are particularly good at absorbing new information with less bias than adults. Adolescents have a unique capacity for cross-cultural understanding. Child psychologist Jean Piaget, he first explored this phenomena with his assimilation versus accommodation theory. In his theory, Piaget explained how children process new information either by including it in its existing schema or set of ideas, or by forming an entirely new schema. Children undergo this accommodation of knowledge on a near constant basis throughout their adolescence, including the understanding on concept of other cultures. Consequently, children that have been exposed to other cultures will likely grow up to be more tolerant and understanding of different perspectives. Unlike adults, they are less likely to perceive and process this new information with internal bias. There's this ability in their mind to stretch themselves so that exposure to different cultures takes place in a person's life. They're more adaptable, and they're more adaptable and open-minded, and our next generation is definitely going to benefit from this. Now, why did I share all this? Because at my school, we believe in this premise very strongly, that we need to bring in this idea of student exchange early on. We all know, like from the speakers, it generally happens at your senior secondary or undergraduate program. But at our school, we believe we can bring it down to our students. And I would like to share with you just one piece that, of this program that we've been following. So please allow me to share my screen, and I will share with you what's happening at our school. Are you able to see the screen?
We can see your screen.
One of the new programs that we've introduced is the Global Student Exchange, bringing in students from other GIS campuses to the Smart Campus so that they have an opportunity to experience next-gen learning Be part of the smart campus. See how technology is being used firsthand.
Yoroshiku onegaishimasu. Watashi no namae wa Babiya desu. Konnichiwa. Watashi no namae wa Nopura Purabune desu.
Boku no namae wa Sattaburata desu.
Watashi no namae wa Faiza desu. Konnichiwa. Watashi wa Niyanada Kurakarani to moushimasu. When I came here, the first reaction was wow.
It was so huge.
The facilities here are amazing. I think this school has a very unique approach in how they are actually like teaching the students, not just about the academics, but even the values that are being instilled. Coming here, we get to know something new and something more, which we could implement there back in our school.
It is learning about Singapore, learning about the culture here, understanding how students function. It's a rich experience for them. And of course, for our students at the Smart Campus, they're understanding Japan better. What is it that students hold dear there as culture? There's huge sharing happening on both sides.
I am actually thinking about universities in Singapore. So coming here gave me an idea about how the life could be here. I felt like I met a lot of new people, made new friends, and it just gave me a boost of confidence.
My father told me to check out universities here if I liked the experience here. And it definitely exceeded my expectations.
This is giving me like this exposure, so at least I can open up to new people and make new friends.
All of these initiatives are helping us come closer to fulfilling our vision of nurturing global citizens.
Well, I'll leave the rest for the panel discussion. Just wanted to share that we have a program that takes in students right from early on.
We extend a warm welcome to our first ever annual day at the new Punggol Smart Campus. Keetana, do you know what is in store for us? Well,
I'm sorry about that.
No worries, ma'am.
Yes, well, on to you now.
Thank you so much. I think I am speaking for a lot of people on this audience where I say that when we looked at that school, a lot of us wish that we were born a few years later and were part of that school campus. Beautiful campus you have now. Although to be fair, when it comes to cultural exchanges, I think my greatest experience of cultural exchange was half an hour at Raffles Exchange. I mean, being in Singapore, you have so many nationalities, so many cultures right there. It's quite the experience.
Absolutely.
Ranjita ma'am, if I may come to you next for your opening thoughts, ma'am.
Yeah, a very good evening, everyone. Thank you for giving this opportunity for the Global Edge School, for me to give a chance to represent the school. Thank you, Mr. Barrett. Your thoughts were very good about 3 types of exchanges. And Mr. Achin, I've been hearing you since quite some time. I like your talk. And thank you, Abhishek, for your sincere and diligent follow-up. You didn't give up. Shivayu, obviously I heard you also. Thank you for calling me. Thank you, Notebook. Yes, what's a question for me, Shivayu?
Ma'am, if you have any initial thoughts, otherwise I will start with the questions.
No. I would just say that, yes, globalization in the past decade made the world a much smaller place than in the epoch of the history. And now with the pandemic, we are truly become one humanity, one world. And we at Global Edge had been cognizant with this idea of one world, one humanity as one of the founding principles of our educational philosophy. We had fostered this idea by means of multiple global students exchange programs, which have been an important part of our school annual events since 2015-16, where we had our students going to Germany, and we also had an exchange program from them. Since we believe in these programs are of real importance, we have continued them virtually during even these pandemic times. In fact, it suited us much more, and it is more children got benefited with this. We believe that there are multiple avenues available for schools that can take part in. The missing ingredient is the will and perhaps the access to the information. about when and how and where these programs takes place and how to be part of this exchange. But we were somehow been lucky to get access to all these programs and being part of it, especially in this pandemic times. We made I would say, make hay while the sun shines. That can be appropriate for the times. In fact, we've been blessed, and most of our children got many, many opportunities with many, many countries in our virtual exchange programs. While we also had teacher exchange programs from other countries. And it was a very wonderful association with the teachers also. But we did not send our teachers as yet, but we got teachers from other countries. And we had very pleasant experiences with that. Over to you, Shubhayu.
Wonderful, ma'am. Thank you so much. Now, as I said, I'm going to be the ignorant one and ask you the questions that you can absolutely shoot me down on. The first one, I first experienced an exchange program myself when I was in my engineering college, and we had these 3 students who came from South Korea when we were first discovered what K-pop meant. And this is way before it became popular. Now, I understand through the course of today's discussions that we all see value in student exchange. The question is, do we promote it adequately then? As ma'am said just some time back, that we have typically reserved it for, senior secondary students or graduate students. Where's the gap in promoting the value of exchange programs to perhaps parents? Melissa, ma'am, if you want to take it first.
I totally agree with you. In fact, I think this is something that, has been looked at. Exchange has been looked at as something, like I said earlier, for senior secondary students or undergrad program students exchange. My personal belief is that we can definitely, have this program for younger kids as well. Yes, there would be a few logistic issues of travel and staying away from their families, or cost could be another thing. But if school is willing, at shared basis, sponsor kids for an experience, because this is learning beyond the boundaries of your classroom. And I think today the focus needs to be able to go out and learn from what is there, because this is again my very strong belief that the world out where our children are going to walk is a totality of experiences. You cannot any longer be cocooned in your own environment. You have to know what is out there. Tolerance, empathy can only come when you start interacting with others. We get so, entrenched in our comfort zone that we don't know what's out there. And exchange programs promote that. So the more we can do, the lower that we can bring it down is better. And so I think your question is, are there enough? At the higher level, yes, not for the younger kids. But schools can work. And like Ms. Ranjita said, the virtual world for us now is actually making, hay with that, the maxim that she used. Yeah. Make hay while the sun shines. We are doing exactly that now with the virtual mode.
Right. Ranjita, ma'am, if I may come to you, what can schools or parents do differently to make it more popular?
Shubhayu, I don't know, but especially if I would take only my school into consideration, first and foremost, parents are more than eager, more than happy that they got this opportunity. We are actually not facing any challenges. Like we like to say that, oh, we're having so many problems with parents not understanding. No, I wouldn't agree with that. They're more than happy, as I repeatedly say, and they are giving opportunities. Only thing is sometimes we have these challenges of children putting that thing about researching for work and parents not trusting that are they really researching or they up to something else online, things like that, small things, small hitches. Otherwise, we don't have any problems with the collaboration with parents. Children are also keen. And now, especially if I would take only these times into consideration, before also during the real physical times, children were keen, parents were keen. As Mr. Barrett said, yes, the whole thing about sieving those right people to send and bringing them back and seeing what are the repercussions after they came back, the good, bad, ugly things. where the challenges. But now we are in a safe zone. There are, we can count our blessings now. It's a beautiful world out now. Maybe we'll say that after this is over. But there are more children who are getting this opportunity, more exchange happening with many, many countries. We have these global classrooms we go regularly to. They just have a knock away from a mouse. That's all. We are getting opportunities. Children are happy. Parents are happy. Teachers are also happy because they can do it. Yeah, only the time zone is a problem, but that's not a big challenge. I would say, like Miss Melissa can tell, she's there from another country and we are out here. So we are able to do it.
Both of you have touched upon the issue of sieving through right candidates. And one of the questions that we have received today during this session is somebody said they would like to know what should be the criteria of selection. Ranjita ma'am, would you want to take a cut at this?
Yeah, criteria for selection of students, if you're sending them abroad, Mr. Barrett has addressed that issue, that topic in detail, while definitely the confidence that we have in the child, that he's not going to be swayed, that he is going to be the representative of a country, not only the school. He's going to be the model of the country. Is he capable of holding such a big responsibility? Is he going to conduct himself well? Also, will he be confident in himself and not collapse with, we don't know what other, the host and who's going to be hosting them and how they're going to take it, whether they accommodating to food also is the biggest thing for children. So I think after all the interviews and filtering, so far thank God, we didn't get any bad experiences. While parents were a little apprehensive, but otherwise, as Ms. Maria told, yes, the younger ones, I'm not so sure how we can send them, even to send them on an excursion, we think twice, but an exchange program maybe will come there in a few years. We'll find a solution like how we found, actually, in fact, we were doing this exchange program on Zoom since last year, while Zoom was not much of a talk. And when I heard that Zoom last year, it was like, oh, is it so? And it was good experience. So maybe the physical exchange does make a much more impact than a virtual one. But little ones, I don't know. But older ones, yes, we can send. It's not a big challenge, in fact. The topic you have given to us, I think, is not much of a challenge. I think. Melissa, do you agree with me?
Yeah, I do agree with you. I think as a school, if you are clear in terms of what your policies are on student exchange, you make those policies visible. You communicate those through all the channels that you have, listing down clearly what the criteria is. Because I think we have to understand that if children are traveling out, there will have to be compromises on food. There will have to be compromises on staying. If you're living in your own room with your own luxury washroom, in your host place, that may not be possible. In fact, early on, we send our children overseas for trips, field trips. And that's when they have to live together. So I think when the school, from school's perspective, if your criteria are clear, the policies are clear, what are the kind of arrangements that are going to happen? What kind of twin sharing or, more than twin sharing accommodation you're going to live in? Then parents and students are entering these programs with their eyes open. It's an informed decision that they are making. I think besides this, we also need to be very clear as to what the outcomes of the program are going to be. So if we have a clear-cut guide and curriculum or syllabus listed out, it makes it even more easier, I feel, for parents and students to become part of the program. And my own view is that from parents' perspective, we must encourage them to read about the host country.
Yes.
What is the climate there? What is the kind of food that is available there?
Culture.
The kind of culture, what they need, what are the nuances that they will have to respect when the child is there. So I think it is all in all, it's a joint effort that happens from the school, the child and the parent, all coming together, making informed decisions before they travel. So I think we all play our roles. It's a great experience.
The question was here, the CBSE school from India can exchange from any part of the world. Yes, there's no limit. There's no boundaries. Any school from any, including a rural and NGO, can also go.
In fact, British Council does run a program wherein they talk for international collaboration. So at our school, we do receive a lot of, requests to have this kind of exchange because they work on projects. Unfortunately for us, we don't, from our end, we can't do a similar program. We can only be the host. So schools in India have programs which British Council has opened up.
Wonderful. Ranjita ma'am, you spoke about the virtual exchanges, and you also said that the impact is not as much, right?
Yeah.
Right now with technology, anything that I want to know about another culture, another country is perhaps just a Google search away, right? Do you think exchange programs are still as relevant? Because it's a 24/7 process of exchange that's happening on social media.
Can you repeat the question? Sorry, what?
I said, is it still as relevant with so much of information available online, so much of connectivity available?
Yeah. That's a good question. But I'm not so sure whether children would really go in and search and learn about all those countries, isn't it? They may not be really interested in knowing about the cultures, and as Maria has explained about many other things that they need to learn. I don't think they would go. Unless we put it in front of them and do that exchange program, then they would do it as a research expected for that program. They're going to plan and work, and in the bargain, they will learn about it. So when we tell, like we had an exchange program of different countries of ancient games was one of them. Then there was this ancient cultural events which are not prevalent. We have this thing in Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, called Burra Katha, where you have this Tanpura, where a person wears a different type of costume, and we exchange that also with the other countries. They were so mesmerized. They wanted to know they thought that Indians live in that costume. They wear those things which look so like pretty garish and very festive and ornate. And the questions from the children from other countries were more related to the costume than what he was talking and singing about. And then they realized that there is an industry which thrives on the costume suppliers also thrive on sending this costume. So that went into a different tangent altogether. So children do learn only if we provide an opportunity, especially in this exchange programs, not about Google and searching. Maybe a few, not many of them would do it. While if we do this, there are many more children benefited, much more percentage of children benefiting. There may be, otherwise it would have been a 2 or 3% of children who are interested in a particular country, maybe because they're traveling or they have somebody close to them staying in that country, or when they are talking to them, they may be knowing about it. But when you are doing this constant cultural exchange program, I think it helps them a lot more.
Wonderful. Melissa, ma'am, do you also feel the same way, that the level of immersion matters?
So, I think with technology, it is, like Ms. Ranjita said, virtual exchange for many more students have become better. They are able to actually, I think the point is that you personalize that learning. When we are doing it virtually, it is not going to Google and searching on a topic. It is a personal exchange that is happening between students.
A personal experience also.
Yes. You saw these children that I showed you from Japan. It was, of course, that was a physical one, but in school, we are right now having a virtual session wherein you are learning through that student's eye. You have a buddy, you work with a buddy or a team. You're learning from their eyes about the culture. You're not reading from Google. Another thing I feel that has happened very effectively is that new skills are being learned because of this virtual experience. They are learning about media literacy. They are learning about digital competence. They're learning about communication on a digital platform. It's pretty different. You have to wait your turn. You can't be jumping out of turn. You have to be tolerant. You have to be patient. So there's a lot more now than just going to the country and learning about culture. You are learning to live in 21st century. These are things that will take you now in your workplace. Once you start entering your workplace, these are the things that you will need. So I feel that this, with technology and this virtual experience, there's a lot more that is coming to the fore.
Wonderful, ma'am. In fact, Sanjita ma'am, one of the most, I think one of my favorite experience of cultural exchange comes from the city or in Hyderabad. I think years ago, a group of African people had come to Hyderabad, and their drums, the djembe, mixed with Indian classical drums, which were prevalent in Hyderabad.
Yes.
And they created the Marfa band in Old City, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that was a wonderful show. Yes. So you had come over for that show?
I used to live in Hyderabad, ma'am.
Oh, okay.
But cultural exchange is always a phenomenon. One of the questions that I have is somehow, when we talk about students exchange, it's mostly with the perspective of a foreign country. However, in India itself, it would not be that expensive for a student from, I don't know, Rajasthan to travel to Kashmir, or from somebody from Punjab to come to West Bengal. And that kind of cultural differences that exist within India, do you think we as a country are overlooking the potential of domestic student exchanges?
Yeah, I would take that question.
Yes, ma'am. Please.
Yes, I agree with you, Shubhayu. I totally agree with you. One way of looking at is, but aren't we as a school totally a cosmopolitan mixture of all states in one place, it's a small society, it's a mini society, a school with all the states people, if not a few people coming from different countries, but mostly it's made of India there. So exchange program, I would say maybe if you have to take this different socio-economic strata into consideration, like say I take an NGO or underprivileged children's school and bring them over, or we send our child over there, that would make more difference than interstate, I would think.
True, ma'am. Melissa, ma'am, your take on that?
Yeah, I feel that especially schools that have a chain of schools, right, in different states and, countries as well, they do benefit largely. For example, our school has about 8 campuses in India itself in different states. It makes it easy because no matter what we say, I mean, all our countries have a mixed group of students, but going into a place, it has its own flavor. So yes, I think local exchange must be encouraged. I think people moving even from Rajasthan to Kashmir, the experience is different. Somebody moving from south up north is different. I think as a community of educators, we must encourage this. I feel there's a lot of potential. And then you're not traveling far off. Within the country, parents are at ease, students would benefit much more. I'm very much for it. I think as a school, we keep having these exchanges and we do it in rotation, So every campus will be host to a big event. So we have the Real World Challenges Convention that happens in Singapore. So my school is a host to it. We'll have all our network schools that come in. We have another program, which is LEAPS, that happens in Gujarat, Surat. That's the campus for games. So all the campuses will go there. So I think that's a fabulous thing to do. Not only look at overseas and country outside, let us learn our own. Let us be rich in our own culture. Let us teach our children what our own culture is all about. And there's so much to learn from within India. So I'm very much for it.
All right, ma'am. Well, my last question is, how would you recommend a school maximize the value from a student's exchange?
I'll tell you what we do. I think what is important at the end of it is reflection on what has happened and action. It's important that once you gain insights, you work with that insight. I'm a very strong proponent of empathy, kindness, values. And I believe that every society teaches you something. Every nation that you go to, every country that you go to will teach you something. So it's important to reflect on what you have experienced in that time on your exchange. Pick up what you can bring back, like some of our speakers earlier said, best practice sharing. Bring that, but bring back a value as well, and then practice that value in your environment. So reflection and action, these are 2 critical points of any exchange program, I would say. So I think that's something that we can all take away and practice.
Great, ma'am.
I would ditto whatever Maria had told. It is profound.
All right.
And we also just want to share this, that we also had this chance last year for Olympics, which we had a collaboration with an organization called Japan Art Mile. And that was, Global Edge was the only school which was shortlisted to be doing a collaborative activity with one school in Japan. And the learning that happened there was immense. I just like to show that. Thank you, Abhishek. You were quick. Just the first.
Good morning, everybody. It's so wonderful.
Supporting Development Fund and its neighbors through the India-UN Partnership Fund and its neighbors through the SARC COVID-19 Emergency Fund and the SARC COVID-19
is receiving a lot of attention. Maybe some of you are wondering what ESG investment is. Okay, I will tell you. First, ESG is...
I think we need not talk too much about it. We can stop it, Abhishek. Thank you. I think we missed that line that I wanted to show. It's perfectly fine. Thank you.
Ma'am, in case you want to share the link that we can circulate to all the participants that are here today, we'd be happy to do that.
Oh, thank you. Just
I have the link.
I think those are the questions that I had. If you have any closing statements, I would leave that to you. Anything from you, ma'am? Melissa, ma'am, Ranjita, ma'am?
Thank you for having me. I think it was an interesting discussion and a very interesting perspectives that were shared. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for being here, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you, Shubhayu.
It's absolutely our privilege.
Yeah. I was very hesitant to come, but I am enjoying it. I like it. And I would like to say you people are doing an amazing job. And
thank you so much, ma'am.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. With that, it is now my job to leave this to Achin for the formal vote of thanks. I think we've had a fantastic discussion. Achin, over to you.
We really had a great discussion. I must acknowledge this. And so all three eminent senior educators that we had today, Melissa ma'am, Ranjita ma'am, and Bharat sir, I sincerely thank all of you for your great practical insights, incidents that you shared, and some wonderful videos and background material that you saw. And seeing a topic like this, there's no doubt about it that the quality of deliberation that we see from our esteemed panel gives me the confidence that this platform of Together for Education webinar today undoubtedly is the best platform for educators from pan-India to come in and share their views. And it is only because of the kind of thought leadership that we have got from our esteemed panel, the kind of support that we have got from educators from across the country, that we have been able to grow from strength to strength. Indeed, this is your platform and the entire credit goes to you. We look forward to your suggestions to make this even better in the days to come, be it in terms of format, in terms of choice of topics. Some great issues were discussed today. And I guess very well summed up in terms of two key words, reflection and action. Undoubtedly, these are the takeaways of the evening. It really sums up the benefits very well. And some of the interesting aspects came up, like domestic exchange programs, the pros and cons, exchange program across economic stratas that ma'am highlighted. I completely agree with that. It may open a window of opportunities. And also, I guess, the role of technology, especially during this trying and testing times of pandemic, and how it can ensure, maybe virtually, that a larger number of students get the opportunity, get the privilege, get the exposure of being a part of these exchange programs. With this key takeaways, with these points, I sign off for the evening, and I look forward to your continued patronage in the coming weeks. Thank you, take care, and goodbye.
Thank you. Thank you, Achin.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye. Nice meeting you, Maria.
Same here, Ms. Ranjita. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.